So welcome back, friends. We are now invited to witness the experiences of our colleagues in their accompaniment with Filipino people in their struggle for just and lasting peace. And to moderate this panel, I would like to introduce first Reverend Dr. Christopher, or Chris as we call him, Ferguson. Reverend Dr. Chris Ferguson is a United Church of Canada ordained minister and currently serving as the International Visiting Professor of Justice and Peace at Universidad Reforma, Colombia, and the convener for the Interfaith Solidarity Network for the Philippines. He has been involved in Filipino solidarity since 1980, including while at the United Church of Canada with the DWOGS, World Council of Churches representative, and also to the UNNYC and the General Secretary of the World Communion of Reformed Churches. Chris was a founding member of Peace for Life, the Stones Will Cry Out Advocacy Initiative, and was a commissioner for Investigate PH. Chris is also a global Kairos member for Justice for Palestine, the Korean Ecumenical Forum, Taiwan Ecumenical Forum, and is the international liaison to the Department of Religious Affairs of Colombia for freedom of religion, peace, and social justice. Let us welcome Chris.
Thank you very much. Beth is, you've worked hard all day to bring your energy and clarity. Thank you. Our panel now is part of the big picture of the founding vision of this conference, which was an understanding that we're at a point between the different organizations that were working hard to bring several things together on different levels. And one, as we saw before lunch, was to really try to see how we can reactivate something that was much stronger in the past of global ecumenical institutional solidarity, where organizations like the World Council of Churches and others put the struggle of the Filipino people not simply as one program among others, but at the center of their work. And at the same time, to strengthen, accompany, and revitalize grassroots expressions of solidarity throughout the world, including and particularly in Europe and other places. So both an institutional, large-spread, global understanding of solidarity and a very much grassroots, people-led understanding bring those two things together in one. So our panel before lunch was kind of the institutional vision of the ecumenical movement, its complexity, including within the Roman Catholic Church. And now we're going to hear from three witnesses, three voices that illustrate the accompanying of the Filipino people in their struggle, and stories that lead again to this intersection of committed people working with the grassroots, giving meaning to what is solidarity, and at the same time pointing to how any individual solidarity has to also issue forth with bringing together our communities. And solidarity is not an individual act, it's a collective act. It is not only a collective act, but an individual one. And we're going to start with, we have three panelists, and we have the privilege of starting with Sister Patricia Fox. I think many people know Patricia's story, and I'll read her little biography, but the fact of the matter, sister, is you have been an inspiration and an example for so many of us. So I just, a special moment to recognize your significant contribution. Now, sister is a member of the Sisters of Our Lady of Zion. Grew up in Australia, as we well know. What I didn't know is that you studied law, and were working in a community-based legal service organization before going to the Philippines in 1990. Sister was a member of the Justice and Peace Group in Aurora and became the regional coordinator for RMP for 3 years, national coordinator for RMP from the year 2000 to 2007, and then moved to the Agricultural Workers Union. And that period of intense, incarnated solidarity ended when forced out of the Philippines on orders of the Duterte government in 2018. Now, intrepid and not to be discouraged, you continue as the chair of the Australia ACHR. And if I could just say that Sister has given us permission to remind her when her 10 minutes are up. Okay? Please.
I think it's easy to be with the poor, the people who are struggling in the Philippines, and just sit here trying to talk. But I thought I'd just go back a little bit about how I got to the Philippines. And I happened to be in Palestine, Jerusalem, in the 70s. And I met an FMM sister from the Philippines there, and it was the time of the first Marcos. And with all I'd worked in a community legal centre for the poor, I lived among, but I never understood liberation theology. And when I was with this sister, and there happened to be a demonstration in Manila, and the people were being water cannoned. And she desperately wanted to be there with the people. And all of a sudden I thought, that's what it's about. I went back to Australia and joined the Australian Solidarity Group, working a lot in the human rights because of the legal background, I guess. And then in '83, I had the joy of having an exposure in the Philippines. And I still blame Charlie Ocampo, but until now I want to go back there. Because at that stage it was the Ecumenical Centre for Development, and Charlie was the one who handled our exposure. And it was just such an enriching time. I think the official exposure was something like 10 days, 2 weeks, but I stayed on for 2 months. And we got briefings, overviews, but we also went to areas, and at that stage the Australian had big projects, road projects, in northern Samar and northern Mindanao, which were supposedly be for development. In fact, they were counterinsurgency because the New People's Army was very strong in both the areas. And part of my exposure was to go to meet the farmers who talked about the road, the project, losing their lands, was going to be of no benefit at all to them because they couldn't use it for marketing. I also talked to the people working on the project, and even there, the Filipino engineers doing exactly the same work as the Australian engineers got less money. So, you know, that whole thing of capitalist, imperialist domination. Part of that exposure also later on, I went up to the Cagayan Valley where there was hamleting. And so I could see the people there. But how people worked together, how people shared, it made such an impression on me. I went back to Australia, continued in the Solidarity, and then our congregation, in one of its chapters, was talking about seeing the world through the eyes of the poor. And we weren't in Asia at all, where the majority of people are poor. And so, given a slight bias, I pushed for the Philippines, and so two of us went to the Philippines. I had planned, because when I was on my exposure, I had exposure to rural missionaries living really among the people in the very isolated places. I had experience with the human rights groups in Manila. I attended a PCPR conference. I think at that stage the KMU were having a congress, and I think it might have always been their first. And it was just after Nino Aquino had been assassinated, so the whole place was alive and people with so much energy for change. And so I went back to Australia with really enthused, but also wanting to go back because it touched something in me. And it was also, I have to say, there was no distinction between the church and the struggling sectors. Like, I wouldn't find any church people joining a strike of workers in Australia, because that's sort of not the communist, you know, that sort of thing. Whereas in the Philippines, the commitment is to the people and to their struggle, and that linking of the church and the people's struggle as a natural thing really spoke to me. So when our congregation decided to go to the Philippines, two of us went, and I chose not to stay in Manila because we were talking about seeing the world through the eyes of the poor. So I went to the Prelature of Infanta with Bishop Labayan, who was quite progressive. And there I joined the Justice and Peace group and started to learn about problems of land. And at that time it was grandchildren coming to claim land that their grandfathers had claimed ages ago. They had no idea where it was. People had been living there for years and tilling. And so and then you had the problem with the apartment agrarian reform, all sorts of anomalies in the agrarian reform program. And I started to discover a lot of the problems of the poor, of why the farmers were poor. Was no land. You know, we'd have great church programs on sustainable agriculture, organic farming, and they'd say, but we don't own the land, we don't have a choice. Even if you did start something up, there's no marketing. Then they were subject to the prices, like they're in the middle of nowhere with no transport. You take whatever the trader offers. And so we started, and they were starting to organise, and that's where I started to become aware of the basic problems and the right. And I think Iris was saying before, the land's for everybody and not for one person only. And these people had been tilling it. And we had, although Aurora was pretty isolated in those days, we had national leaders come up, and the Indigenous people. We also had a multi-sectoral group, which was church people, mandated organisations, and basic sectors. And the Indigenous had noticed helicopters landing, which started our whole campaign on mining. And it was people coming in for the mining. And then they started, and so gradually I could go to Manila and get the details of where the mining was to be. And we used that as an education campaign. So we gave that to the leaders of the different sectors, who then educated their members. And we had a massive mining campaign, and until now there's no mining in the area. But then when I actually went to the RMP, you saw the issues all over, the same issues. The farmers didn't own the land they tilled. The fisherfolk had no way of preserving their fish. The Indigenous, because they had minerals or logging or whatever on their land, were being pushed off. And so we would gradually, you get, and in the same time while you're doing this, you're also enjoying the people because they have parties, they have celebrations, they have fiestas. So it's not just this, and also, like, you didn't have phones, so you just arrived somewhere, and there was always room. And we often used to have discussions about how come in the big convents there was never any room, and when you got these little houses there was always room. But anyway, I got to understand through the people and accompanying them and whatever they went, and they had this thing in Aurora that they'd always come back from whatever they were planning, whether it was some caravan to Manila or everything, and they'd always say the Hubat na Madre will go. And they always call me the Hubat Madre, if you know it's naked, but I didn't run around naked, but I didn't have the habit. But it was just, I just admired the people with when I went on fact-finding with them, the courage, the determination, never giving up. And I think, just to end, because I'm getting the nod, one of the things that, when my deportation case started, one of the things they said was missionaries should be in a country to preach the gospel and convert. And I felt like saying, well, my answer was, I felt like I was preaching the gospel every time I sat with people who'd been killed, their families, every time I went with the farmers on a walk or a march, every time I joined the urban poor when they were being demolished. That to me was preaching the gospel, and the conversion took place all right, but it was me being converted to know that the struggle is an integral part of my faith. And living out that faith involves working with the struggling people for liberation so that true justice can come about.
And Sister Patricia, you continue to preach the gospel powerfully. This session now, we want to work hard at not simply receiving and being informed, but taking from these testimonies of witnesses and applying them about what it would mean to reactivate our movements in solidarity. One of the things that stood out from the very beginning was that Sister Patricia's story not only starts with going and learning, but with a well-planned, very carefully understood exposure program, that she was welcomed by a community of people that were prepared to help her come to deeper understandings. She then took that back to her own community and was consequential in applying the learnings not just for herself, but for her whole community. And then from that, insisted of never separating the solidarity and relationship with individual people in their humanity, in their fiestas and their celebrations, and drawing structural conclusions. And that is why it was imperative for the government of the Philippines to get her out of there, because she incarnated in every way what our task is, so that we have to show up, be informed, walk with people, learn from them, and then draw the conclusions and apply them around structural change. We're so thankful for your witness. And now, moving to another, I think, powerful witness of this connection. We are pleased to have, I'm one of the great joys that I have is to serve with Deaconess Joyous, Prim, along with Richard Solution as the co-conveners of the Interfaith Network. And so she'll now be able to share with us her experience, which has to do with really walking with base communities and a grassroots experience of struggle through solidarity, through mission exposures and experiences, and deep experience in ministry with Filipino migrants. Deaconess Joyous is United Methodist Deaconess and is from the California Pacific Annual Conference. I think that's Methodist Talk from your regional group, right? And has currently been duly appointed as co-convener of the Hong Kong Campaign for Human Rights and Peace in the Philippines, and missionary with Filipino migrants in the city. So the floor is yours, and we can see already from your brief biography that you bring together the level of working with the base and major impact campaigns and accompanying the people in their struggles. Over to you.
Thank you, Chris. Good afternoon. As someone originally from the United States but currently serving over in Hong Kong, a question I often get asked is, why as someone who is non-Filipino, do I care about the Philippines so much? And to answer this, I have to go back to 2012. At the time, I was serving as a young adult missionary in Hong Kong, working with primarily Filipino and Indonesian migrant domestic workers in the city. A few months in, I found myself wanting to better understand what was happening back in their home countries that led so many women working far away from their families. So I joined with Migrante Hong Kong member organizations, and it was with the migrant domestic workers where I began to understand the situation back in the Philippines. Understanding the lack of jobs and government corruption, how activists were fighting for a better life, and how governmental policies exported people, and yet they continued to organize for jobs, a living wage, and just and lasting peace in the Philippines. As well as learning what does real solidarity mean as different nationalities worked together. But it wasn't until November 2012 when I had the opportunity to visit the Philippines for the first time that I began to understand the human rights violations that were taking place. My office was sending me to Manila for a conference, and I requested 1 week to visit a fellow young adult missionary in Davao City. There I began to hear stories about the work they did supporting Lumad communities. We visited Moro communities where every house had a family member who was either working or had worked abroad in the Middle East. And on my second to last day, my friend was informed that the Philippine House Committee on Human Rights was holding a hearing in Davao City where victims would be given their testimonies. He, like others from the local churches, were being asked to attend to support the victims, and they would find somebody to accompany me on my last day. I asked instead, could I accompany them to the hearing, and they agreed. So the next morning we awoke and headed over to the hearing where Sister Stella, a Catholic nun, delivered a situationer on the human rights crisis in Mindanao, and at the time highlighted how U.S. military intervention continued to impact the indigenous communities. After the situationers, witnesses with their human rights lawyers began to give their testimonies. Little did I know that hearing would become a foundation for now 10 plus years of ministry of solidarity with the Filipino people. That night, I realized my eyes had been widely open. The violations had a name, they had faces, and my faith meant I could no longer keep quiet about them. So as I entered my time in Manila, marked by the work needed to prep for the conference, I sought out every chance I could to actually go visit the urban communities, learning more from the leaders and families impacted, meeting children of migrant workers who had died overseas as they fought for justice as the government failed to provide basic dignity. My host thankfully noticed how I was seeking out opportunities to learn and made arrangements for me to learn and visit different sectors. I went out to Hacienda Luisita on the anniversary of the massacre to learn from the farmers themselves. I met with church leaders and deaconesses to hear how others were living their faith in action, and joined with the women's sector to hear how Gabriela was committed to ending violence against women and children. I marched in various actions, attended meetings, and along the way prepped for a conference. but internally was beginning to learn what does being in solidarity truly meant. The one thing I knew is the final week arrived, a trip for work had turned into a calling. That final week was the launching of the Asia Pacific Coalition for Human Rights in the Philippines, where for the first time I got to meet leaders from around the Asia Pacific, mostly who, like me, were non-Filipino, but supported the work with the Filipino migrants in their countries and cared about what had happened in the Philippines. I began to find my people. The next year, in 2013, I moved back to the Los Angeles area, where I met United Methodists, who had been supporting the Filipino people since 2010. They invited me to join our Conference Philippines Task Force and shared with me the history of how, following their first trip to the Philippines in 2010, after the arrest of the Morong 43 health workers, they joined the church leaders and communities, praying and calling for those arrested to have access to their families and their lawyers in a successful attempt. One of the United Methodist pastors actually opened his church to become home for a Filipino NGO, rent-free, that was supporting Filipino migrant victims of labor trafficking. These United Methodists all had stories like mine of how they had been transformed in the Philippines. Stories of clarifications of callings into fields of serving the poor, of how they learned what solidarity and the day-to-day meant. 2 years later, I ended up getting elected chairperson of the task force and began to lead a yearly solidarity trip to the Philippines. We focused on ministries of listening and presence, going to poor communities both in the city, but more in the rural areas, partnering with the National Council of Churches in the Philippines and other local community organizations. We visited Mindanao yearly until 2017, where we went during martial law to visit the Lumad schools, just days after President Duterte had threatened to bomb them. So the next year, we visited the Aita communities in Tarlac, whose communities were inside a Philippine military base. A visit where daily the Philippine military tried to surprise us with a visit, but the community kept us safe while sharing their first-hand encounters with U.S. military operations in their farms and surrounding community. That year, when we returned back for our conference, our yearly resolution in support of the Filipino people included more action-based steps and actively declaring our support for Filipino Methodists who were in the midst of the communities under attack while condemning militarization of the communities. We worked with many churches throughout our annual conference to support the work of ICHRP in the United States to stop U.S. military aid in the Philippines. In 2019, we were invited to join the World Council of Churches Pilgrimage for Peace and Justice, where our delegation visited Negros, meeting organizers who had been under a brutal attack hosted by Zara Alvarez, herself out on bail, who had successfully negotiated with the local jail for us to visit a lay pastor and leaders from the United Church of Christ in the Philippines and the Philippine Independent Church who had been recently arrested on trumped-up charges. Later that day, we visited with their families as well as their family members of other extrajudicial killings there in Negros. We came back agitated and inspired. It was August 2020 when I returned to the mission field and back to Hong Kong. Now, as the coordinator for HK CARP, we continue to support the issues of Filipino migrants in Hong Kong and resumed our yearly in-person visits to the Philippines. Each year, we bring teams to visit the Philippines from many different backgrounds. We visit rural and urban communities across the country, and there the same transformative conversations continue as they had back when I was based in the United States. Folks who are burnt out find energy to keep organizing, understanding and solidarity for migrant workers is built, and collective solidarity is understood. In our first trip, a local Christian journalist joined us. Together, we spent time with farmers in Lupang Ramos, learning from them and getting to be part of their community for a few days. On our last morning on the farm, she reflected how despite these challenging times in Hong Kong and around the world, after seeing how the farmers are still fighting for their lands and not giving up, and how they had organized their community to care for each other, and how when they invited the local church to come and share, that the seminary came to learn from them first and share the gospel in many ways that met their needs. She had found hope again in the struggle. Last year, one of our Indonesian Muslim sisters got to spend time with the Moro community leaders. She shared as she returned that she had wondered how she could be a good organizer and a good Muslim. Would others listen to her? But from the Moro woman she had met, she learned she could be a good organizer. So in closing, one of the best ways to learn about the situation in the Philippines is to spend time in the communities of the most oppressed, especially the poor and rural communities in the Philippines or local migrant communities. So as I close, I want to share a quote from a Catholic priest at my very first action at the Philippine consulate following the murder of Father Fausto Pops Centorio of the Pontifical Institute for Foreign Missions. There was another priest from Pine who is based in Hong Kong, and he asked, "Why are Catholic priests being murdered in a Catholic country? It's because we follow Jesus to the margins of society, serving the people there. Father Pops taught indigenous people to read and learn their rights. He lived like Jesus did, and that cost him his life. Now we must continue his mission." Thank you.
Thank you, Deaconess Joyous. Profound again, and I get to take some of the very same streams to apply them, but specific to this story is that not only this experience of actually submitting yourself to a situation of learning from the people constantly that is well supported and well carried out, but you'll also notice, if I heard you right, Deaconess, that within your story, for instance, from very basic actions, connecting it with other larger campaigns, with other people that are also interested in other situations of oppression and seeing common roots and building. And at the same time, for instance, very large projects, like the work that you did with the exposure that was then able to tie in to the World Council of Churches justice framework, so that this constantly the both and, the each, the this and that of human experience requiring very much the accompaniment that issues in witness, connecting up with people on all the levels of the experience, but never failing. The other deep point here is the organizational dimension, that not only experience, but leave organized, leave to plan and impact, and we thank you for that. And now, for our third speaker on the panel, we have Claire Chastain, who is with the Catalan Association for Peace, based in Barcelona. She'll share with us their programs and actions in the Philippines, both in Catalonia, Spain, and Philippines. I just make the point that Catalonia is Spain for you. And also, very importantly for us, and we saw that it's being sold, but to really lift up the experience of the International Observation Mission for the 2025 midterm elections. So, Benvinguda, and there you go.
Thank you. It's a little bit difficult after these two persons because I'm not so experienced, but anyway, I think I can share many interesting things with you. Indeed, I am from Catalan Association, so not a faith-based association, but truly, and this is not the first time, I really think that we are so similar in our goals and ways of, what we pursue is so similar that I really feel home. So it's nice to see this completely intertwined between us. As I said yesterday, but I would like to repeat it, we were founded in 1990, and we're a social organization, an NGO, and we are committed to defend and promote human rights, all the human rights, everywhere and for everyone, social justice and social transformation, and human emancipation and dignity. I think it's absolutely not different. And I also wanted to say that when it was founded in 1990, ACP, our association, was founded with one purpose in the beginning, which was to start and develop the solidarity with Cuba when no one was doing it. And it's still one of our main priority. And then about 25 years ago, we started getting involved in Colombia in many areas, but especially in the peace talks and the peace processes. And we did what we can do as an NGO, which was to raise awareness, to explain what was this conflict about in Colombia. Who were the FARC? What did they want? What did they fight for? And we did what we can do as an NGO, which is build solidarity networks, which then push the politics for human rights and for peace talks and peace negotiations. And that's the basis on which I think 8 to 10 years ago we started looking, to the Philippines on the other side, west, est. And we thought maybe on the basis of this experience we have in Colombia, but also in Palestine and in Congo, we could be maybe useful in the Philippines. But I have to be honest, we started from scratch, completely from scratch. That much that, because Spain, as you know, was the colonial power in the Philippines, but even these people forgot completely about that. They just think about the Philippines because the beaches are beautiful and there are typhoons. That was what we had when we, what are the Philippines? I don't even know where it is on the map. So we said, maybe we have to put the Philippines on the map. On the map and on the human rights and the peace map. But we started from scratch ourselves, so we learned a lot. We learned how, and it's a way to accompany and to witness the Filipino people. We learned because we listened to them, their voices, their experiences. We hosted the Secretary General of Carapatan a few years ago. Then we hosted, because we have a program in the government of Catalonia has a program for human rights defenders at risk. We can host people for 6 months, and we had the privilege, and I am especially privileged because I was accompanying her, to host Zarina Mosni in this program. And she was fine, she was in a safe space for 6 months, etc. But I think I learned much more than she did. We learned a lot listening to her. And it was COVID, so we could not travel to the Philippines yet. What did we do? We invited Filipino people from Germany, from Belgium, from the Netherlands, and again, we had the privilege to host Kakoni and Kalui, Siegfried and Cynthia de Duro, Bishop Ablon, Yesha Ramos, Elnora, the coordinator of Gabriela in Europe, and listen to them. We gathered them in a flat in Barcelona, and make them talk. Please talk. Explain to us the history, the factors of the conflict, the root causes of the conflict. We even had the privilege to celebrate Kaloui's birthday. I have to say, it was it's a great memory. And from that moment, we took a step forward. This is when we also decided to join iChirp, because I think this is important also to, escalate. Because alone we can do many things, but together we can do much more. So we joined, and we actually participated in the first IOM, International Observation Mission, in 2022. And then in the second one a few months ago. And it was really an extraordinary experience. We, as ACP, also had the possibility after COVID to travel twice to do this exposure. It's been said a lot between yesterday and this morning. But of course, it's the best way to know, to understand. But because I have to say, even though we had the privilege to listen to Tita Cynthia, to Tita Conit, when you go there, you really feel it. You really feel it. And we went twice. Manila, it's important, you have to be there, you have your institutional agenda and you meet with people, but then get outside. And we went to Mindanao twice. The first year we went to the southern Mindanao, Jensen, Cotabato, and the second time we went to northern Mindanao, Cagayan de Oro, Iligan City, and we met with a huge diversity of persons, of grassroots individuals, organizations, from trade unionists to students, youth, peasants, fisher folks, lawyers, RMP, I-5. We even had the possibility to visit a political prisoner. It was one of the questions this morning. We could visit Emilio Gabales in Iligan City, in the prison in Iligan City. And after that, we bought books for him. I don't know if this is kind of an adoption of the political prisoner, but he said, I want to read, and we bought and sent books to him. And each of them, everyone, whatever they came from, told us, please tell, when you go back home, explain, tell people what you saw, what we want, what are the root causes of this conflict, and that we want a peace process. We want to achieve a just and lasting peace in the Philippines. So that's what we do when we bring this back. We make noise as much as we can. But I want just to say something about exposure strips, the IOM and the other, because sometimes we don't, you don't dare to go, maybe I'm going to be a burden for them. It's going to be difficult. It's true that they have to organize, and sometimes you make sure that you don't put them in an awkward or a dangerous situation. But we never felt it was a burden, on the contrary. And I want to share something with you. The IOM, this year, reached remote communities that are almost never connected, and they never get attention. And this time they were able to be part of a network. And this is very important for them on the ground to strengthen their alliances locally. And I have another example to share. When we went to Cagayan de Oro, the fact that we went there made possible a gathering of a grassroots organization, faith-based mainly, called In Peace in Mindanao. They had not gathered for 4 years. And the fact that we went helped them organize, gather again, and be stronger again, because Duterte systematically destroyed all those networks, all those local networks, because they're strong. So we really help also when we go to these trips, we help the people on the ground to get organized again. And I just wanted to point this out. And then, of course, it's an international commitment for solidarity that you strengthen. It has been said this morning, and again, this is good, but then you come back, and what do you do with all this? That you do concrete action. You organize seminars, trainings, exhibitions of photos, art. We organized an important peace conference in Barcelona last September on the peace process in the Philippines, and we invited people from Colombia, from South Africa, from Ireland, and from Guatemala to share experiences on peace negotiations. But there are many other things that you can do. We also try to translate it into projects on the ground. Currently, we have a project to strengthen and accompany NUPL lawyers and Karapatan paralegals. It's just a little thing, but if we can be useful, I think I have to finish. I have a couple of minutes. And all that we do, we always do in collaboration with Filipinos, because we never speak. They speak. We offer the space. And we work with Carapatan and UPL, UPLM, Kalikasan, the University of Mindanao in Iligan. In Jonila, for example, was a participant in one of seminars. I mean, this is really important not to speak on their behalf. They have a space to express themselves. And it's the best way to, to make our public in Catalonia and in Spain and in Europe understand what's really going on there. And I just want to finish by saying that you have said that sometimes people ask you, why do you care? It's true. Because the Philippines, at least for us in Europe, it's very far away. Why do you care? Because what's going on in the Philippines, the struggle for a just and lasting peace in the Philippines, for justice in the Philippines, is not only for the Philippines, it's a universal struggle. And every single little effort that we can make this struggle and the solidarity grows. Thank you.
Very powerful coming together. And I think so many points, and we're so thankful, Claire. First of all, the basic point is that accompanying and witnessing requires us, I think, to all make common cause. So your point that there is no distance between the commitment of social movements and faith communities is so important. And so thank you for that point. Also, I think, again, we see this constant connection of learning and being with the people. I think we all will need to bear the advice. It's okay to have your institutional commitments, but get out of the building and go to the people and be with the people. I think you also added a very, very important part. Many good witnesses there, but one of them was to never underestimate, and this when I'm wearing my t-shirt, never underestimate the power of international solidarity. So we are not white knights that come to save, absolutely not. But to walk with people whose very dignity has always been trodden down, and who are never respected, and to enter into their suffering community and see them is powerful. And thank you for making that point, that what we add. And I think also in terms of our methodology, we should take this learning forward, both with Investigation PH, because it was during COVID and we couldn't get to communities, we dealt with the most alienated, far away communities by phone and brought them in. And so it was amazing. What we thought was a big problem is we had this contact. You now talk about this with IOM as well. So that one of our methodologies that we should be very much clear about is we will break down those barriers. We will not allow people to be disconnected from the power of international solidarity and change-making community. And you brought that very powerfully to us with that inspiration. And I dare say, I mean, maybe I'm projecting, Claire, but I mean, the experience that I think part of your power is because the people of Catalonia also are engaged in their own struggle. So this is as we heard from some of the people speaking from the United States, is also, it's not an imposition to see the connections between our struggles. So it's not like we're burdening other people by bringing our struggles into our accompaniment, but that I understand is to be mutually enriching.